Howdy, y'all. I'm Dr. Jeff Jarvis, and I am joined by Dr. Tiffany Pleasant. I think y'all have met Dr. Pleasant. She's one of our EMS fellows. I think I have met some of y'all, but because this is such a big system, I have not yet had the opportunity and pleasure to meet all of you. I'm really looking forward to doing that. I think this is the first video I've shot here. So I hope to do more of these, and I'm really looking forward to getting to meet y'all. Dr. Pleasant, what are we here to talk about?
So the reason we're meeting today is because we received a self-report from a crew that had an interesting case story that we'd like to share with you guys. So here's how the story goes. A patient decided to be seen at a local urgent care clinic, and the patient was declined evaluation and treatment by the individuals at that urgent care clinic because the patient did not have insurance. So the question was, is that an EMTALA violation? What exactly is EMTALA, Dr. Jarvis?
So it turns out this concept of patients showing up at hospitals and being declined care because they can't pay or being diverted to another hospital was really common. Turns out people were being harmed by this. The federal government stepped in and passed something called EMTALA. EMTALA is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act.
My understanding is that there are multiple components to EMTALA and requirements that you have to fulfill in order to abide by the EMTALA law. So
not go to EMTALA jail?
Yeah, absolutely. So what exactly are those components?
So there are three main components. Number one is the requirement to perform a medical screening exam, or MSE, by qualified personnel and determine through that MSE whether there is an emergency medical condition. Active labor counts as an emergency medical condition. It may be that the emergency physician or qualified personnel, usually an emergency physician, has to run some tests, obtain imaging, but they have to do whatever is necessary to determine whether an emergency medical condition is present or not. So number one, perform the MSE. Number two, determine if there is an emergency medical condition. And then if there is an emergency medical condition, they need to provide treatment sufficient to stabilize the patient. So those are the big components. Now, the other component deals with a facility that does not have the ability to stabilize the patient. And in that case, the law recognizes you may need to transfer the patient.
If that transferring facility is deciding that they don't want to stabilize or they're declining to see that patient, is that legal? Can a freestanding ER or an urgent care clinic legally decline to see a patient?
So great question that goes really to what our question was. And the answer is yes, if they are not covered by EMTALA. So EMTALA only covers emergency departments or hospitals that provide emergency services and accept Medicare. So if you are a freestanding facility, regardless of what you call yourself, federal law, federal EMTALA law only kicks in if you accept Medicare. So there may be state law that impacts this, but according to EMTALA, if you don't accept Medicare, you can't have an EMTALA violation. Okay. So in this case, that urgent care does not have to see the patient if they can't pay for it. Similarly, if you are a doctor's office, you don't have an EMTALA violation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Obviously, we're in the business of EMS, and we're not hospitals, we're not clinics, we're not emergency departments. Exactly how does that apply to us with an EMS, or when does it not apply to us with an EMS?
Yeah, so this is a common question. Can EMS be guilty of an EMTALA violation? How does EMTALA apply to us? There's a really easy answer. It doesn't. EMTALA does not apply to EMS at all.
Okay.
Even though we accept Medicare, doctors' offices accept Medicare also, but they are not, they're not a hospital. We're not a hospital.
So you're saying that EMTALA doesn't apply to us.
Very clear.
However, is there an obligation or a request for us to continue transporting that patient regardless of?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have ethical requirements. We have moral requirements. I think it's ethically wrong to refuse care We also have city statutes, interlocal agreements. We have binding requirements on us to provide service. And then we can also be liable for, say, other civil liability in terms of negligence.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is EMTALA, you can't be guilty of an EMTALA violation if you're not a hospital that accepts Medicare.
Absolutely. Understandable. Okay.
So specifically to our question, we did the right thing. The clinic, the urgent care, whatever they had on the side of the building, was not going to provide service. Even if that was a gross EMTALA violation, we're still going to do the right thing, and we're going to take care of the patients and take them to an appropriate
Absolutely.
facility. Exactly like what we did.
Okay. So let's go to a scenario where EMS has been requested to transfer a patient from one facility to another.
Yep.
Can those hospitals divert EMS?
Yeah, so the question of diversion, fortunately, here in the Fort Worth metropolitan area, we are absolutely blessed. If you've never practiced outside of this area, you may not be aware of how big an issue diversion can be. Hospitals in other places go on diversion all the time. The question is, can you go on diversion, and does that create an EMTALA violation? So the short answer is yes, you can go on diversion, and no, it does not create an EMTALA violation. But it's a request, and we don't have to abide by that request. If they say, hey, we're on diversion, don't bring us that patient, and we show up there anyway, now they have an EMTALA obligation, and they must do the medical screening exam, stabilization, and appropriate transfer if necessary.
Absolutely. So let's go to another scenario then. Let's say one of our crews arrived on campus of a hospital. They're in the ER. Is that crew obligated to stay there with that patient until the receiving facility nurse or other personnel accepts the patient, or can they just drop the patient off and leave?
Yeah, so another great question, and another question that fortunately we just don't see very much in this system. So the question you're talking about is a scenario that drives wall times. The idea of wall times is you show up to drop off your patient, the triage nurse puts you against the wall and says, wait until we can accept the patient, and 3 hours later, you're still holding up the wall. So what some places, hospitals, are doing here is telling EMS they cannot leave the patient there. They can't go back in service. They have to stay there with the patient, either because they say it's an EMTALA violation or because it is abandoning patient care. It's not an EMTALA violation, and it's not abandoning care. Now, one thing I do want to say about this is it may not be, given the situation, may not be the most appropriate thing for the patient. The good news is if you bring in a critical patient, those are not the patients that hospitals are refusing to see.
Right.
Hospitals outside of our area.
Right.
They will take care of the sick patients. We're talking about the non-sick patients. Now, in our area, it is certainly possible that an ED can be overrun and may ask you to wait for just a second while they finish cleaning a bed or they make something available. A short wait is entirely reasonable because we understand people in the emergency department can get their butts kicked just like we can. So we have to be reasonable about it. And fortunately here it's not an issue, but the bottom line is that is not an EMTALA violation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Jarvis. I hope you guys have appreciated this video. We enjoyed making it and talking with you guys here about EMTALA. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email, and we'll see you guys next time.
I'm really looking forward to working with y'all guys. Take care.